Now, this hall is not filling up. I know tea is excellent out there, but finally we have to be. Sir, Anand sir, could you please call your students and the others also, not just your students, please call everybody. Independent journalist sir, ଟିକେ ସମସ୍ତଙ୍କୁ ଡାକି ଦିଅନ୍ତୁ ପ୍ଲିଜ୍। ଆମେ ତ କେହି ଇଣ୍ଡିପେଣ୍ଡେଣ୍ଟ ପାଇଲୁନି, ଆପଣ ତ ଆଟଲିଷ୍ଟ ଇଣ୍ଡିପେଣ୍ଡେଣ୍ଟ। କେଉଁଠି ସାର୍ ତପନ ସାର୍ ପରା ପଦାରେ ନଙ୍ଗଳା କରିଦେଇ ଗଲେ, ଇଣ୍ଡିପେଣ୍ଡେନ୍ସ କ'ଣ? ଏପଟେ ବି ଦେଖିବ ସେପଟେ ବି ଦେଖିବ। Shall not be permitted to enter. I would actually like to relinquish the stage to Mr. Anant Nath. Anant Nath is the editor of The Caravan and the executive publisher of Delhi Press, India's leading magazine publishing house. He restarted the magazine Caravan in 2010, shaping it as a publication dedicated to long-form narrative journalism. And while I was in Delhi, I was actually subscribing to the hard copy for a long time. And I was very impressed, and I have plagiarized portions of it and spoken about it in Parliament also. That apart. The magazine was among the first that his grandfather had started in 1940. Today, it is amongst the most respected publications from South Asia, known for its bold investigative reportage on politics and business, as well as its nuanced coverage of arts and literature. Mr. Nath is the president of the Editors Guild of India, re-elected just recently for the second term. Congratulations, Mr. Nath. The senior most body of editors and journalists in the country, as well as the president of the Association of Indian Magazines, the National Association for All Magazine Publishers. He has studied management from IIM Lucknow and political science from Columbia University, New York. I would like to invite Mr. Anant Nath on stage and let him take over the work from now on. Thank you.
Thank you, Tathagat. We would like many people to plagiarize from Caravan. The only request we will have, please subscribe to the copy of Caravan and then plagiarize. We are very open with our content being reused, rechurned, and so on. But thank you, Tathagat, first of all, for being a partner for this initiative. Just for everybody to get a sense of why we are here. I've been part of Guild office for the last 4 or 5 years, and first as a treasurer and general secretary, and now as president. And one thing that our members have always reflected upon and introspected upon is that Guild, this is Editors Guild of India. And while the name is Editors Guild of India, in practice we end up becoming Editors Guild of Delhi, because a lot of our membership ends up being in Delhi, because of course most large national media, their editors are residing in Delhi. But even then, a lot of issues, a lot of activities of the Guild do end up being Delhi-centric. And there is an urgent need, there has been an urgent need for many years, if not more, to expand the footprint of Guild across the country. And we've been thinking about, how to go about it. Expansion would mean expansion in members, because an organization like this is only as strong as the membership it has. It's a, the guild is a voluntary organization of editors. It is not an organization of institutions. And the idea here being that as institutions, as the last session talked about, there are pressures on institutions that we have to deal with. And we have to live with the practicality of it. But the guild being an organization of individual editors, irrespective of where they may go on to be across institutions, should be another, perhaps a stronger anchor for journalistic values, independent of the pressures that their institutions end up facing, and therefore a higher moral compass. And an organization like this will only be as strong as the membership not just in a particular region, or definitely not limited to national capital, but across the country. And therefore, this is something we've been trying to figure out: how does the guild expand its membership across regions, but also carry on its work, recognizing the challenges that various regions face. And whilst we may agree that the issues remain the same across the country, but the way those issues get manifested and the way different power centers in different states, whether the government, whether some other power center, the way they impact a journalist's rights or media organization's right, need to be documented, need to be talked about. So this initiative, which is, I'm glad to say, the first such initiative we put together of taking Editors Guild's activities across the regions, is the first of its kind, and I'm very glad that Tathagat has been so proactively our partner. It gives us immense pleasure that we plan to organize these series in the months to come. We have one in Bangalore, which is planned in December. We're talking to various other press clubs, but this is the very first state where Guild has sort of organized, at least in the last few years, this program. So congratulations, everybody. Congratulations to Tathagat. Thank you to Tanaya for supporting us, and thank you, of course, all the supporting partners, the Education Institute, KITS, and of course, Sambad and Press Club of Odisha, and Dharitri in Odisha Post for sure. And, the Guild, of course, has been taking up these issues very proactively, at least to the best of our ability. Mr. Ram had talked about the collective action that Guild and press clubs across the country need to take. And no matter how dismal the picture may appear at one end, but the reality is also that if media gets its acts together, if press associations, Guild, even media organizations, they come together where you can challenge the government's action, which you may find difficult in an individual capacity, either as a journalist or as an organization, because you don't want to paint a target on your back. You have practical constraints. But as a collective body, you can do far more. It opens up the space. And that's where, this need for collective action is very important in a time like this. And whilst one can be slightly pessimistic about the time we're living in, there is also enough and more reason to be optimistic. Just in the last 6 months, we've had 3 major victories. The broadcast bill, Mr. Ram had alluded to it. The government had proposed a draft broadcast bill last year. They were expanding the scope of the handles that the government was giving itself in censoring and blocking content. When the new government came to power, they introduced another new broadcast bill where they were expanding the scope from beyond television to OTT to even individual content creators on YouTube and Twitter, and they would all have come under broadcast bills. Guild opposed it. Various other organizations opposed it. Internet Freedom Foundation was there. Various press clubs, DigiPub was there. We all worked together, and eventually it forced the government to drop the broadcast bill, at least for the time being. So these are small solaces we need to take in the victories that have come to us by collective action. Under the IT rules, the government had put together a fact-checking unit, which would have given the central government a sweeping power to determine what is fake, and not just fake, but misleading regarding affairs of the government. And their version would have been the last and final version. We as journalists, we as media organizations, we as even individual commentators would have no handle to oppose it, except to go to the court, which we know, of course, is an extremely arduous and a procedurally difficult journey. But the government would have been the final arbiter and a censor in deciding what is right or not right about their own affairs. The Guild, along with some other organizations, challenged it in the Bombay High Court. The Bombay High Court had a split verdict earlier this year. It was referred to a third judge. We continued the battle, and finally the third judge agreed with Justice Gautam Patel and held the rule unconstitutional. I think which was a big victory for all of us, because if the government had come up with this notification, it would have been really end of journalism in a manner of speaking. So there is enough and more to take sort of pride in and work upon. And today's program has been curated to talk about the same issues that the Guild has been talking about: ethics in media, challenges in digital media, challenges of AI, which Mr. Ram eloquently elaborated upon, and of course the way laws are being framed. Which brings me to the session that we have at hand. Last few years, just to put a few words in context of how this session has been sort of put together, the government has introduced a series of laws. The IT rules were introduced in 2021. The broadcast bill, which was of course introduced, has been taken back. Data Protection Act was passed. There was a Telecom Act which was passed, which also has some handle to regulate content. And the new Press Act was introduced last year. It's now an act which replaced the earlier PRB Act. And over and above, the criminal laws, new criminal laws were introduced this year. In each of those laws, there are provisions which give a state agent, whether a ministry, a department, or a law enforcement agency, a wider handle to label a certain content wrong or against Article 19.2, which is the reasonable restrictions on freedom of speech. The starting point of all of this is that we don't have absolute freedom of speech in this country, unlike in US, where the first amendment said there is absolute freedom of speech. In India, we don't have absolute freedom of speech. In fact, very contrary, our First Amendment expanded the reasonable restrictions to freedom of speech, whatever may have been the reasons. But even a government, even a Prime Minister of the caliber of Nehru, did sort of fall to this trap of increasing the restrictions on freedom of speech. And we, over the last 80 years, I think, have paid heavily by this broad expansion of whatever is called reasonable, what are subjective, what is subjective to one person may not be subjective to the other person, and that handle has been very widely distributed amongst various layers of the government. So how does media operate? What are the challenges we operate? That's what we thought we will talk about in this session. We have with us 3 speakers who have been very intricately involved in either bearing the brunt of it or deciding on these issues. Justice Anand Patnayak, very well known, of course, in Odisha, needs no introduction, a former judge of the Supreme Court, former Chief Justice of Madhya Pradesh and Jharkhand High Court, and somebody somebody through his work is renowned for his integrity and dedication to upholding justice. And of course, Justice Patnayak, his notable decisions, especially on the coal allocation, underscored his commitment to transparency and accountability. And for his incisive legal reasoning with respect to the democratic principles, Justice Patnayak remains a steadfast advocate of judicial integrity. We have Sanjay Hegde, senior advocate of Supreme Court, again somebody who has taken up these issues and has been a great ally of organizations like the Editors Guild and various other free speech activists in defending their rights. And of course, Paranjoy, who's been an advocate, a victim, and a crusader in all these issues that we've sort of faced. So, if I may, I will ask each of the speakers to please take stage, first of all. Please welcome everyone. Justice Patnayak, Senior Advocate Sanjay Hegde, and Paranjoy. And I'm going to ask each of the speakers, starting with Justice Patnayak, to give 15 to 20 minutes of opening remarks on this topic. We are giving it a little bit more time because this is a very, very deep topic. About 15 to 20 minutes, I would suggest, followed by a rather free-wheeling discussion. And again, if people are wondering that there has been a shift in the schedule, we have put the digital session after this one, in case people are wondering, because the digital session was supposed to be at this point. Um, and Justice Patnayak, if I could invite you to give your special address. Thank you.
Good afternoon to all of you. When I got the request from Mr. Anant Nath to come to this program, I asked him, what do you want me to speak on? And I am a judge of the Supreme Court. I can speak on Article 19(1), your freedom of speech and expression, which also incorporates the freedom of press, the media. He said, no, we are more concerned with Article 19(2), which imposes restrictions on the freedom of press. So that is where I start from. And then I see your concerns, media concerns. I've been reading about those in the newspapers. I will suggest some changes which you can take up with the government, and some which you cannot take up with the government, you have to take to the courts. Right. This is the only remedy that you have. And I must tell you, I was here in the previous session. I also wanted to be a journalist. First a doctor, then I gave up pre-medical, then I studied a lot of political thought, political science. Then I thought I become a journalist. But then I started thinking, where will I get the money from? Survival would be very difficult. So I gave that idea. I'm not that fortunate as Tanya Patnayak, who has a Sambad already to start with. So I gave up that. Let me look at the profession where I can also earn good money and remain independent. That is how I joined the legal profession, where I earned well, but my earning was very limited to 20 years, and the judiciary picked me up for judgeship, and I became a judge for more than 20 years, 20 and a half years. So therefore, I'll start from Article 19(1)(a) and then Article 19(2). As you all know, under Article 19(1)(a), all citizens have the right to freedom of speech and expression. There is no mention of media there. There is no mention of press there. But the Supreme Court has said freedom of speech and expression means also freedom of the press or freedom of the media. That is incorporated in it. And then the courts have said freedom of speech and expression for media cannot be anything more than that of the citizen. So whatever limitations are there for a citizen, those limitations also apply for freedom of press or media. They cannot ask for more. Because Mr. Anant Nath had sent me some letters addressed to the Prime Minister and then to the leader of the opposition. They went through it. And he's asking for some exceptions. I thought over them. I said, how can there be exceptions if the freedom of speech and expression for the citizen and the freedom of speech and expression for the media is same? They cannot carve out an exception for media separately. Whatever limitations are there for the citizen, whatever law they have to face, whatever consequences they have to face, media also has to face them. So this is one thing that must be clear. We can't carve out exceptions for the media in the name of independent journalism or for democracy, so on and so forth. Now, Article 19(2) says, nothing in subclause A of clause 1 shall affect the operation of any existing law or prevent the state from making any law in and so far as such law imposes reasonable restrictions, very important, reasonable restrictions. So it's not any restriction, reasonable restrictions on the right conferred by the said clause in the interest of sovereignty and integrity of India. This is number one. Number two, security of the state. Number three, friendly relations with foreign states. Number four, public order. Public order was not there originally. It was incorporated subsequently by Pandit Nehru's government by the First Amendment, because they found the Supreme Court struck some acts down. They say, yeah, it may be affecting public order, but it is not protected under 1992. So therefore, public order was subsequently incorporated, which has created a lot of problems. Because all the offenses basically try to maintain public order. Decency or morality, or relation to contempt of court, defamation, or incitement to offense. Now, let me come how the law was therefore brought in. There was the Indian Penal Code earlier, you know, and now the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita 2003 has come in. And I would quickly tell you, I need not go through the provisions. Section 152 of this new law is same as sedition, 124A. I have a chart and I can also compare them for your information. So 124A Indian Penal Code is kept intact in section 152. There may be some changes in words here and there. Then 196 of the new law is equivalent to 150A of the Indian Penal Code, and that relates to, promoting enmity between different groups on grounds of religion, race, place of birth, residence, language, etc., on doing other acts prejudicial to harmony. Obviously, this is to ensure that the public order is maintained. You are seeing in the newspapers somebody criticizing a particular religion, and then that group of religion who has been affected, they start pelting stones on the other groups. So many law and order situations come. They are all justified provisions. Maybe the language may be creating problem. Then 197, imputation, assertions and prejudicial to national integration. This also is very important. You can't just say this kind of a law should not be there. Then 299, deliberate and malicious acts intended to outrage religious feelings of any class by insulting its religion or religious beliefs. Very much necessary today. Right. Then next, 302. 302, it says uttering words, etc., with deliberate intent to wound religious feelings of any person. And then 356 is defamation. So there is a debate so far as defamation is concerned, because it affects really, it does not affect law and order. It affects an individual. Why not just have a tortious liability, civil liability, damages? A debate. In many other countries they have given up. This can be thought of, the legislature can think of this, get rid of defamation as a criminal offense and put it as anyway, it was challenged before the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said, no, this reputation of a person is very important. This should remain as a criminal offense. And that is how, since the Supreme Court has already justified it, you can't say that this defamation provision can go. There was a chance for the Supreme Court to say otherwise, but they didn't do it. Right. Now, the problem here is, in all these provisions, in many cases where the offences are not really made out. I was hearing last session, the state government or the central government they don't like all this criticism. So they would like to mobilize their police machinery and book all these journalists who are criticizing them, some offense or the other. And police starts acting. It's not happening only in central government, it's happening all over the state, all over the country. You see Tamil Nadu, they are doing the same thing. If you see Karnataka doing, I heard Ruben saying about Odisha, they were also doing the same thing. In Bengal, they are doing the same thing. They will not leave. Because political power is such, the state machinery is mobilized against any criticism. And they have to just find out which particular section you booked in. They don't dictate the section. They only ask the police people, this, take action against him. I don't know what law you find a law and book him. This is what they do. And they find a law and book it. Now, when the matter goes to the magistrate, in 24 hours they have to be produced. You are a magistrate, whoever is booked. That is the constitutional provision in Article 23, 22.2. Right. It says, any accused has to be produced before the nearest magistrate within 24 hours. Any detention beyond 24 hours will be only with the authority of the magistrate. So it is for the magistrate to apply their mind and find out in which case the arrest is proper, in which case arrest is not proper. Unfortunately, and I'm saying that even though I have been a judiciary for so long, unfortunately, the magistrates do a very mechanical job and they don't apply their mind. In my opinion, the magistrates should be very committed to these constitutional provisions, be committed to liberty, and ensure that no innocent person is detained beyond 24 hours. This is what has gone wrong with our country. I have been the Chief Justice in Madhya Pradesh, and I put this question to my students, why are you not doing bail? Why are you not applying your mind? But they don't do it mechanically. They are not that committed to liberty. This is the sorry state of affairs. So what is the remedy then? What is the remedy? The remedy, I think, is, in the present state of the guild and the press, media all over the country must move the government to bring about some amendments in the law. Not as an exception, because I said, you cannot be accepted from the other citizens, but to provide checks against wrong arrests or abuse of these provisions, penal provisions. How can that be done? As you know, all of you know, under the CRPC, old CRPC, there is a provision for sanction of prosecution of government servants. Before a court can take cognizance of an offence, sanction of the government is necessary. Even under the Prevention of Corruption Act, sanction of the government is required, competent authority. Before the court can take cognizance. So that acts as a check that a wrong person is not being unnecessarily, the facts are examined, wrong persons are not being unnecessarily booked by the police. Right. Even on the Mining Act, Development Act, there is a provision that nobody else except the mining department of the state government will sanction an offence related to mines. So these are normal provisions. I would suggest you should move the government to provide some check, not of the government, not sanction of the government. One authority could be the Press Council of India. And one of the functions of the Press Council of India, you know, I understand that Press Council of India is not very active, right? But it is headed by a Supreme Court. It has to have a, some provision. There is no provision there. Or some body, some independent body which will examine, let the police complaint come before them, or let a private person make a complaint to them, and let that body examine it and give sanction offensive provisions. This is very important. This check can work on. Absolutely. But you can't be accepted from the normal law that is applicable to all citizens. This is a suggestion that I gave. You can work on it. Now, the second area, as you know, contempt of court is part of Article 19(2) of the Constitution. Don't have to be bothered about contempt of court, because contempt of court means ultimately the court has to decide. And civil contempt, you will not be called on to answer. That means disobedience to the orders of the court, or writs of the court, or judge in the court. That normally the media is not concerned with. It's only one party. Unless you are a party in that case and you are disobeyed. Like you saw in the Ramdev case, how he's being summoned all the time, right? Because they are not disobeying. That's why. Now, so far as criminal contempt is concerned, there is a danger there. Criminal contempt has been defined to mean to mean the publication of any matter, so far as you are concerned, which scandalizes or tends to scandalize or lower the or tend to authority of the any court. Like an evidence, you may publish it something. I'll give you an example. Prejudices or interferes or tends to obstruct any judicial proceedings. Some case is going on, though the courts don't exercise it. I remember that Nupur Talwar, how much of interference the media did. Media almost convicted. And I was sitting in the court when I saw the CBI gave a closure report, but yet the court opened it up. I said, no closure report. They have to be summoned. So when the matter came to the Supreme Court, I said, why is someone when the CBI is given a closure report? But my colleague, my brother judge said, no, sir, let it remain. Because they made acquittal, and it happened from Allahabad High Court acquitted them. But the family suffered a lot. So, this is the next example. Then interferes or tends to interfere with obstructs or tends to obstruct the administration of justice in any other manner. This is a very broad thing. So when administration of justice is affected or when the court is scandalized, authority is gone, is eroded, then there is a problem. Who will respect the court then? That is why these contempt provisions are there. And contempt provisions also have, in the Contempt of Court Act, there are provisions, innocent publication and distribution of matter, not contempt, they have said so, in Section 3. Section 4, fair and accurate report of judicial proceedings, not contempt. And Section 5, fair criticism of judicial act, of judgment, after it is published, not contempt. And finally, they have said, even if you do contempt, apology, if somebody comes and gives an apology, mistake ho gaya, the court normally will say, all right, take an apology and go. So contempt of court is no problem. Sometimes it is a problem. I'll give you, I had an opportunity to handle once. When I was a lawyer in Odisha before my elevation, and Mr. Biju Patnayak was the chief minister, suddenly I received a letter from Mr. Biju Patnayak in a personal envelope, and I opened up. He's written it in his own hand. On the top, Sri Anand Kumar Patnayak is requested to defend me in the High Court in this case. And I opened up the papers and found it was a summon issued by the High Court to him for contempt. And what was against him and against your paper, Samaj. You know what he had done? In one meeting, in one meeting, he went to the stage in a conference and said, the High Court judges are like white elephants of Siam, right? Very expensive to maintain. 2.5 lakhs we spent on each High Court judge. Every month, Mr. Tathagat Satpathy was among that. Right. And is it justified? Is it giving relief to our poor people? So somebody filed, a lawyer filed a petition in the High Court. Huh? Yes. He's a lawyer. He filed a petition. And Samaj is the second party, first party, Biju Patnayak. And I had to defend him. So I telephoned to him. I have to draft an affidavit to show cause reply. Have you given this statement? Yes, yes. I have given that statement. No mistake about it. Don't disown it. You defend me otherwise. So I defended. And it was a division bench of Justice P.C. Mishra and Justice G.B. Patnayak. And my argument was, look here, every citizen has a right to criticize an expensive system of justice, including the High Court. He's not criticizing any particular judge. Every citizen has a right. Right. And then I cited a judgment of the Supreme Court Justice Sabyasachi Mukherjee, where the Law Minister of India had given a statement somewhere in the south. Shiv Shankar had given a statement that Supreme Court is a class institution. It has number of bourgeois and this class and that class. As a result, justice is not coming. Right. So that petition was dismissed by Justice Sabyasachi Mukherjee. He cited a very good judgment of Lord Dennings, which said that, see, on the one hand there is contempt, but on the other hand, something greater is at stake, democracy. Freedom of speech and expression, that's necessary. You must balance it. You can't just give contempt big priority. So, what I am saying is considering this approach of the courts, not to haul up people for contempt, be approached. There's another example I'll give you. Justice Krishnaiyer was the bench, Justice Beg was the Chief Justice of India. A letter was written by Justice Beg, the registrar to the High Courts during emergency, that why High Court is not doing this, High Court is not doing that, High Court are not doing this. Right. Then somebody took it out of the newspapers that during emergency, High Court has been functioning much better than the Supreme Court. So this came out in the papers. Justice Beg issued contempt notice. Well, High Court is doing better. Justice Krishnaiyer was sitting there. And then when the hearing started, Justice Krishnaiyer said, how is it a contempt? How is the contempt? Let us drop it. So they dropped it. That's a reported order in the papers. So therefore, Supreme Court, the High Courts are quite liberal, very liberal. And even if some order is passed against you, it's appellable. Single judge passes an order, goes to the division bench. Criminal contempt in any case has to be a division bench. Then it goes to Supreme Court. They never punish you harshly, right? Very rarely they put you inside. Now, the last item, and I'll stop that because the other is the legislature. Under Article 1053 and Article 1943, powers and privileges and immunities of each house, its committees are almost the same as that of the House of Commons in England. Vast powers of breach of privilege, not defined. So, there are a lot of danger, and today politics, lot of danger for media getting into trouble from any legislature party. So this is the area. But if they issue a breach of privilege notice, all that the Supreme Court would do or the High Court would do is this a breach of privilege? If this is a breach of privilege, then no interference, because the Supreme Court has held in the first case Mr. Sharma, Mr. Sharma, that Article 19(1)(a) and Article 1053 and 194(3) has to be balanced, reconciled. And it cannot be struck down. It cannot be struck down. So if there's a breach of privilege, they have the power to act. But Supreme Court later case, Raja Rampal case, 2007-3 SSC, they have said, in any case, if the court finds that there is no breach of privilege, but they are abusing this power to take action against anyone, the court has the duty to protect the citizen because of Article 20 and 21 of the Constitution. So there are safeguards there also. You can go to the High Court or you can go to the Supreme Court. And mind you, this is a very dangerous power. I recall that once when I was a judge in the Supreme Court, in the High Court, an IAS officer, quite a senior IAS officer, he had issued a circular. He was the CMD of ITCOL, Mr. Rishikesh Panda. So issued a circular saying that no MLA will be allowed inside the guest house of the ITCOL without my permission. That circular got in the hands of some MLA. He made out copies and circulated amongst all the MLAs in the house. And Mr. Navin Patnayak, Chief Minister, when he walked into the assembly, all the MLAs got up and said, we want suspension of this officer. Immediate suspension. And Mr. Navin Patnayak couldn't follow. He walked back, right, to his office. And in the afternoon when he goes to the office, he finds a resolution, unanimous resolution, adopted by the House for suspension of this. So Mr. Navin Patnayak thought, I must protect my seat, perhaps. He suspended the officer. He suspended the officer. Then he moved, first this tribunal, then came to us. As a High Court judge, division bench, stayed the suspension, saying, Assembly has no power. Under the Act, All India Services Act, state government has the power. And state government has done it. Mr. Navin Patnayak has done it as a state government. But he has to apply his mind. Whether there is a grave offence, a grave misconduct, and whether suspension is required for any inquiry, no application of mind, state the suspension. I signed the order. My colleague on the other hand telephones to me, the other judge in the division bench, shall I sign this? Why? Do you know the consequences? And what consequences? We may have to go inside. The House has the power. I said, I know the consequences. But we have to take that risk if we have to remain independent. And we took that risk. They sat down to decide what to go, what to do. Finally decided, no, we have to go to the Supreme Court. They went to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court did not stay it. And ultimately, it just issued a notice. Went on. And thereafter, they forgot about it. Right. So, you have to take, as independent journalist, sometimes you have to, if your commitment says do it, do it. You have to face the consequence. Independence has certain price. Right. I am sure Mr. N. Ram remained. What suffering Indian Express did not go through in the emergency days, when newsprint was limited, when the Indian Express building was sought to be taken over in Mumbai. So for independence, you have to suffer, otherwise you can't be a journalist. If you are committed to journalism, please do it. And finally, so far as other rules affecting freedom of press is concerned, you can always challenge it under Article 32 or Article 226. The Supreme Court if you see the judicial precedents, I have written some judgments of that. Article 19(1) way has been given a lot of expansive meaning. Very, very fundamental. Very, very fundamental. We don't allow that fundamental right for freedom of speech to be affected at any cost. Very rarely do we uphold the restrictions. We're very careful about that. I have delivered some judgments also. Cannot be lightly handled. You must have heard also Justice Chandrachud saying so number of times. Freedom of speech and expression has to be protected. It's very, very important. In my view, that's very important. And one area which I was hearing, if you have to really protect freedom of speech and expression and remain neutral, my view is the media houses should not own that. The business houses should not own it. Business houses should not own media. If they own media, they've got so much of business interests. They're bound to come under pressure in any government in the interest of the business. Never. So, therefore, media houses should not be owned by a business family. This is absolutely necessary. This is absolutely necessary. At the end, I would say, for democracy, independence of judiciary is important, everybody knows. But independence of media or press is equally important. Equally important. You must have seen a few years back, presently it is better, how judiciary started crumbling. And along with it, how media started crumbling also. And that we should not. Neither judiciary should crumble, it should do its duty, nor should media crumble. Do your duty, and I'm sure if you do your duty, government and legislatures also will be under control. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I think so the points that you have raised and touched upon, if we were to truly elaborate on that, it will be a full day session, because you have really touched upon each and every fundamental point that both media and judiciary is facing, and you have articulated that in a very, very lucid manner, but it of course requires much deeper deliberation. And before I call on Paranjoy, I'll just make two observations. One is a wishful thinking and one is just a clarification. The clarification was that in our letter to the Home Minister, we had not asked for journalistic exemption, but exception to the extent that any FIR to be registered should be after a scrutiny of a higher authority, which is what, of course, you were also recommending. Yeah. Any authority. So I wanted to clarify that we were not saying that we are above. We also respect Article 19(4). We are equal in front of law, but we just want, because journalists are working, some of these FIRs or complaints are on work being done by journalists as part of professional duty. There should be a higher level of scrutiny. And the wishful thinking is, and again the lawyers here will, and you will be a better place to correct me, isn't it true that wherever a judge is it the court can be summoned wherever a certain judge is? So the wishful thinking is, if that was extended to former judges also, then your notes on contempt of court would give great solace to us, because one of the institutions that we as media fraternity find very difficult to comment and criticize is the judiciary, because the sword of contempt is always hanging, and whenever we send an article for a certain review to let's say a friend, a lawyer friend, that we are writing this article on the judiciary, they are also equally fearful of contempt of court. So your words are very big, give us solace.
Today, if you read the newspapers,
Yeah.
almost every judgment delivered in the Supreme Court is criticized. No,
I think
what I'm saying is, when I was in the Supreme Court, I didn't get any criticism of my judgments. But two instances I'll tell you. One is this Lily Thomas case where I struck down the provisions of the Apprentice People Act and said, once you are convicted, once an MLA or an MP is convicted, out he goes from the house. He cannot file an appeal and wait till the appeal to be said. That was the provision. I struck down. Right. Then what I heard was, from many lawyers, wherever I went for a dinner, sir, you are being criticized every day in the Central Parliamentary Hall, all condemning your judgment. And in the Times of India said, Supreme Court strikes at Parliament. Next day, there was a politician who said, let us strike back at the Supreme Court. Right. But interesting was, that judgment remained, could not be got over, even they tried to do it. But Rahul Gandhi tore off the ordinance because the president said, I will not sign this. Right. But what criticism was, I found one day a full coverage in the Indian Express, an advertisement by Association of Democratic Reforms. And it showed that a judge lying on the ground with the judgment showing, and three politicians, one with a broomstick, another with an axe, and third one with a lathi, beating up the judge. So that was the criticism, that was the cartoon that was there. I went to the Supreme Court and I asked my other colleague who had signed it, this is Mukhopadhyay. Who is it, Mukhopadhyay? Only one judge is shown, two judges have signed. Then he said, sir, in that cartoon, did the judge have a moustache? I don't have a moustache. Right? No. Yes, there was a moustache. Then it must be me only, they are hitting me, because I have a moustache. This is one cartoon. Second criticism that I had was, nobody criticized it. Nobody criticized it. A judgment that was in Right to Information Act by my colleague, a judge. While writing the judgment, he said, first he struck down. I said, don't strike down. You have to read it down. While reading it down, he said, judges of the Supreme Court, judges of the High Court should be Information Commission. I said, what have you done? You have saved it, but how can the provision is not there? Right. Then I was reading the newspapers. As a perception of the people also important. So we reviewed it, removed that clauses, and made it a different provision altogether. And we said, no, this cannot be done. If the Act does not provide for judges, then you can't put judges there. But information commissioners must be properly appointed by a search committee and all that. That is what it is. This is the only two things I remember. We correct ourselves also. There's one judgment of this is Bhagwati, in Antule case, made a mistake by saying that Antule will be tried by the High Court. Antule file a petition. How can I file when the Act says special judge has to try me? So they say, earlier we correct our mistake, the better it is. Right? So judges also correct themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Paranjoy, can I invite you to speak?
भाइयों बहनों देवियों सज्जनों ladies and gentlemen धन्यवाद 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 thank you so much Editors Guild, thank you so much all of you. Each time I've come to Odisha, it's been a very significant occasion, and I'll try and make sure this one is too. The reason why I'm the second speaker is they think that if there are too much legalese, one judge and then a lawyer, you might fall off to sleep. So I have been invited because I can sing and I'll dance. And though Anant Nath is not paying me, I will nevertheless sing and I will dance. And I'll know that every single word I say and every action of mine is going to be immortalized in YouTube. So, let me begin by one of the last remarks that the Honorable Judge made. He said, business houses should not have media interests. Hello, goodbye. The two richest businessmen in India, the two biggest oligarchs in India, are the biggest owners of the media, Mr. Adani and Mr. Ambani. I am not telling you an official secret, it is a fact. Official secrets is another case of judicial, you know what the government does to the law. The Official Secrets Act is an old man, he's over 100 years old. And there is a young teenager called the RTI, the Right to Information Act. But the old man is not giving any precedence to the young teenager. Therefore, the RTI is in a mess. It's been consistently weakened by the government because they prefer the Official Secrets Act. Next point, sir, and I'm only going to speak to you for 15 minutes because that's the time that has been given to me. I won't take any longer. Judge Sahib is absolutely right. This 19.2 is the problem. Who decides what is reasonable? Yuktigat. Juktigato. Who says? My neighbor who doesn't like my face? The gunda down the road? The constable in the local thana? The magistrate of the lower court? Or the Chief Justice of India? Who decides what is reasonable? That is the problem. That is the discretion, and that is where all the problems arise. Now, let me take a few steps back. And I want to take what Mr. N. Ram said a little forward. Today we are living in a day and age where among the two largest multinational conglomerates in the world are Meta and Alphabet. These are run by two individuals or founded by two individuals who are today in their 40s. They're younger than me. I'm an old man. I'm going to be 60. I have turned 69 the other day. You're like my children, most of the audience here. Meta, Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook, Instagram, and above all, WhatsApp. WhatsApp. Apple. Leave Apple aside. Let's look at Alphabet. Alphabet is the owner of Google. It's not that every word you can search and find out. They know if you have your map on, they know where you're going. So it's Google, but Google is not only Google. Google is YouTube, a virtual monopoly they have on YouTube, or on the whole audiovisual medium. And part of Alphabet is Android. Well over 85% of all the operating systems in your mobile phones are Android systems. Only a small proportion has Apple. So imagine these two corporations founded by individuals who are today in their 40s. Look at the amount of control they have. What you watch, what you read, what you hear. This is the age, the post-truth age. The age, as was pointed out earlier, the age of disinformation and misinformation. Let's come to India. Once upon a time when I was young, a telephone is a luxury, used to be a luxury. Today, India has about 140 crore people. Go to the website of the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India and you'll find that the number of subscribers to mobile phones in this country is in the region of 115 to 120 crore. What does that mean? That many SIMs, SIMs have been issued. What does that mean? What is a SIM? Subscriber Identity Module. It's inside your mobile phone. Do you know that in most parts of India, not just Bhubaneswar, not just a small town, Go to Kianchar, go anywhere. In most parts of India today, if you exclude infants, there are more Sims than human beings. This is the Naya India. अच्छे दिन आ गया जी, मोदी जी कह दिया अच्छे दिन आ गया. ठीक है, आपका बैंक का खाता में you haven't got 15 lakh rupees, but that's all right. These are electoral promises that are made in the heat of the moment sometimes. WhatsApp gives you end-to-end encryption. What does that mean? I'll give you one concrete example. Some years ago, a Muslim laborer was burned to death in Rajsamand district in Rajasthan by a fanatic who's right now behind bars. And he was burned to death, and one of his relatives actually videographed it. And it went viral. They showed how a man was being burned to death. When the police authorities went to WhatsApp and said, please tell us who was the first originator of this content, they said, we can't tell you. Our design architecture does not allow us. So even when heinous crimes are committed, the only way you can get your WhatsApp messages is when the police person seizes your phone. I've been honored. My phone has been seized several times. So was Mr. Arnab Goswami's phone. That's how you knew how television ratings can be manipulated, how a gentleman can become the information advisor. But let's move on and come to our Honorable Prime Minister. Shri Narendra Damodar Das, Shri Narendra Damodar Das Modi is the one and the only Prime Minister of India, one and only Prime Minister who has never addressed a press conference openly. Tali bajao, bache. Every Prime Minister of India, some point of time, has taken, it's an unscripted, spontaneous press conference. Mr. Modi picks and chooses the people who he wants to give interviews to. And since I'm being recorded, I'll give you only a few names. There are many others. Shri Rajat Sharma, my friend. I've known him when he was a part of the Akhil Bharatiya Vidyarthi Parishad in Delhi University. Madam Anjana Om Kashyap. Mrs. Navika Kumar. Shri Rahul Shiv Shankar, also known as RSS, Rahul Shiv Shankar. I can give you some more names, if you like. Mr. Goswami is feeling a little left out, maybe because I only mentioned him once. It doesn't matter, there are many others. Deepak Chaurasya. Now you see, he picks and chooses them. But he is not just journalists, no? He picks and chooses non-journalists. You remember that very famous actor, Akshay ji? Arey Baba, wo Canada mein tha, abhi Bharatvarsh mein aa gaya. He's one of the top income taxpayers of this country, you know. Very important question. He asked of the leader of the world's largest democracy, Mananiya Pradhan Mantri ji, my driver, he asked me to ask you this question. आप आम कैसे खाते हैं? बिल्कुल जी, आप काट के खाते हैं या चूस के खाते हैं? I mean, it's such an important question. Only the leader of the world's biggest democracy can ask this question. Anyway, this is our life, so we have to live with it. As was already pointed out, it's not just the misuse of the law on sedition, the law on defamation. Never has the law of sedition been used so often as it has in the last 10 years. And as was pointed out by the Honorable Judge before me, he was from Odisha, therefore I mention him by name, Justice Deepak Mishra, the former Chief Justice of India. He's the one who said the right of a person, the reputation and the freedom of expression, and he justified why criminal content, manhani, should be both a civil offense and a criminal offense. I'll say some personal things about me, please don't mind. I'm the only citizen of India against whom Shri Gautam Adani's lawyers has instituted 6 cases of defamation. 5 are in Gujarat and 1 is in Rajasthan. Fact. These honorable lady and gentlemen did not answer my question. He had a little role to play in why I resigned from the post of editor of the Economic and Political Weekly. But let that be for the time being. The honorable judge mentioned the PCI, the Press Council of India. I was a member of the Press Council of India. I acquired notoriety because I was one of the authors of a report called Paid News, How Corruption in the Indian Media Undermines Democracy. There's a story behind it, but I will not get into it. But to describe the Press Council of India as a toothless tiger would be giving it a compliment, paying it a compliment. You know, शेर देख के तो लोग डर जाते हैं ना, उसको मालूम नहीं है कि शेर का दांत नहीं है. Sir, Press Council is actually weaker than a toothless tiger because it cannot scare anybody. It has no punitive powers. It is a quasi-judicial authority set up by an act of parliament with no powers. It has only powers to admonish, powers to criticize. Bad boy, don't do it again. Bad girl, go stand in the corner. Bad boy, catch your ears, go to that corner, go up and down. I'm sorry to say, the quasi-judicial body is just that. But the problem in India is we have a multiplicity of regulatory bodies as well as self-regulatory bodies. Let's take one example, the CBFC, the Central Board of Film Certification, also called Censor Board. It's been recently packed by propagandists of the Prime Minister. One of them once said, you know, James Bond, you have been smooching for 7 seconds, cut it off, make it 3 seconds. You know, censorship in India is a subject of a big issue. We can talk about the OTT platforms and the depiction of violence and sex on the screen. And why? I mean, it's a huge subject. I'll leave it for another occasion. So you have the Censor Board. You have the Press Council of India. You have the Information and Broadcasting Ministry, the Suchna and Prasaran Mantralaya. They are the licensing authorities for television channels. They can withdraw it, they can suspend it. And that's not all. You have the TRAI, the Technical and Commercial Regulator. And then you have self-regulatory bodies. You have bodies like the Advertising Standards Council of India. You have bodies like the BCCC, Broadcast Complaints Council, something. You have the NBSA, the News Broadcasting Standards Authority, etc., etc. You have a multiplicity of bodies who are supposed to regulate what you watch, what you hear, what you cannot hear, what you should not hear. Therefore, we have complete chaos, complete anarchy, arajakata, complete anarchy. Today, we are in the day and age of convergence. It's all in the palm of your hand. Your newspaper is in the palm of your hand. Your radio is in the palm of your hand. Your television set is in the palm of your hand, and more. Look, radio in India. Akashvani is a unique organization. But we are among the only, just as we are among the few countries in the world where defamation is criminalized, we are among the few countries in the world where news and current affairs on radio is a monopoly of the government. All India radio will decide what you can put out on the radio. Prime Minister said, Prime Minister said, Prime Minister said. He cut the ribbon, he laid a foundation stone. Man ki baat, are baap re baap. Man ki baat. I will conclude a little earlier than scheduled so that my lawyer friend can come and speak to you. He is a lawyer, not a liar. And if he's keeping you from lunch, you blame him and not me. All right? So the point I wanted to make is about dogs. You know, I love dogs. I think most dogs are better than human beings. You know, even when they're angry, they're snarling, you know they're angry. You know they're happy, they're transparent. They don't say something to you on your face and do just the opposite. They don't stab you in the back. So because there are so many aspiring journalists, You have to ask yourself, what kind of a dog do you want to be? So there is the watchdog. Journalists are supposed to be watchdogs of society. At 4 o'clock in the morning, the thief has entered your home and wants to burgle you. So the old dog starts barking. So the burglar is alarmed and goes away. You don't know, the burglar doesn't know that dog has no teeth. बूढ़ा हो गया ना, उसका भौंकना आता. He can only bark, he cannot bite. But he is a watchdog. Good, very good. But then we have the Godi media, the lap dog who sits on your lap and is very quiet. Forget barking, forget biting. You can stroke it gently, it'll wag your tail. Especially if the lap belongs to a powerful person, a big neta, a big babu, criminal, mafia don, mining mafia don, military officer. The very, 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 very quiet the dog is. Ravish Kumar coined that phrase, by the way. Intellectual property rights are his. He coined the word Godi media, and he also coined the word WhatsApp University. तो बौद्धिक संपत्ति का अधिकार रवीश कुमार जी के पास है. मैं सिर्फ उनको, I am just a fan of his. You know, people think he's better off now that he runs his own channel. I'm not so sure. NDTV, before it was taken over by Shri Adani, I think he had that big screen, he had the small screen, he had a team, and you don't know the algorithm of YouTube. He may be getting millions of views, but how much is he actually earning from YouTube? Because YouTube is a monopolist, just as WhatsApp has become a virtual monopoly. So you have watchdogs, and you have lap dogs, Godi media. Then you have the intelligent guide dogs, you know. In Switzerland, the Saint Bernard dogs would rescue people who are caught in a snow blizzard. Yeah, there are dogs that can help a visually challenged person cross a street. There are dogs that can sniff out explosives, ganja charas, afim from our luggage. So, sir, we have reached a stage where we have to ask ourselves again and again, what kind of a dog do you want to be? Dhanyavad, namaskar. Thank you.
Thank you, Paranjoy, for really lighting up the audience. And because you brought up the topic of lunch, just a housekeeping announcement. We will not hold you back for lunch after this session. Lunch will be after this session, and the panel after this has kindly agreed that they will shift their session post-lunch, and Tathagat has agreed to extend his warm hospitality by giving us an encore or extended stay at the Press Club. So I thought I'll just let you know so that people should not be thinking that the lunch is another 1 hour from now. Right after we conclude the session, lunch will be served. And before I call up Sanjay, because Press Council's reference has come in Paranjoy's speech and Justice Patnayak's, the other thing is the Press Council chairman, even though, and it's an observation only, is appointed by the Parliament, but in a scenario like this, where the chairperson of Rajya Sabha is also with the government, and the Speaker of the Lok Sabha is with the government, we know who's making the appointment of the chairperson of Press Council. Sanjay, if you could ask you to come and take the stage.
Good afternoon, and I'm reminded of what my mother once said about some English member of parliament who was called the dinner gong, because he went on opining while they were thinking of dining. So I do not wish to opine very long. One of the principles of advocacy which Justice Patnayak's fellow judge, Justice Kadju, would advise us was to be brief, to be bold, and to be gone. So I think that one of the reasons that the Editors Guild of India and the Press Council has called me is my name. My name is Sanjay. And if you look at it, the very first journalist that we know was Sanjay. Sanjay was tasked and he was given the strength to look at a battlefield, decipher it for a blind king, and narrate it faithfully. In Mr. Ram's words, he had a credible informational function. He also had a critical function where he told Dhritarashtra that, look, here you have gone wrong. When Dhritarashtra at one point of time had exiled Vidur, it was Sanjay who was sent to get Vidur back. And he also had, at the end of the war, the task of setting a virtuous agenda. He was called by Yudhishthira and told to help in the task of reconstruction. And he stays on with the kingdom right to the end, where Dhritarashtra and the others walk over into the forest. He accompanied them. He saw to it that they died in a forest fire, reported it, and then went into the Himalayas. So Sanjay, as a journalist, is probably a very high standard, and that is why possibly, despite my name, and despite like Justice Patnayak, I too wanted to be a journalist. And I was told that, look, the pay is not very good and you are the first of 5 children. So it's better that you find something else. And I ended up through a possible career in the civil services, where I was supposed to be in the Indian Information Services. I avoided that and I ended up as a lawyer, where I met a former Minister of Information and Broadcasting, Arun Jaitley, who when he heard that I could have been in the information services, he said, yes. Oh, our paths would have still crossed. I said, yes, our paths would have crossed because my file would have been on your table for suspension. So I am very glad to be here to look at the task and at the scenario that now exists and do my own little bit of Sanjaying. And I'm not calling you Dhritarashtra, but I am trying to tell you exactly where your path of duty lies, like in the Bhagavad Gita, because other than Krishna and Arjuna, the first person who hears the Bhagavad Gita is Sanjay. Here, I would say that we today are in a post-truth world. The post-truth world is where the world has got accustomed to facts not really being facts. There's a word called truthiness. It sounds like the truth. You want it to be the truth, and therefore, it must be the truth. This is where the journalistic function of insisting on a critical function of checking what is the truth. Because somebody correctly defined journalism as saying that if somebody says it's raining and somebody says it's not, it is the journalist's job to open the window, check whether it is raining, and then report. It is not the journalist's job to say, okay, what would be more convenient? Would our sponsors, who are fertilizers companies, who want it to rain, should we then go by what they say and then say that there is rain when there is no rain? Or what would my editor like? The function of journalism is also to communicate, and to communicate without fear. We've heard much about freedom of speech and expression and the reasonable restrictions that have somehow eaten up that freedom. I often think that we as a society emphasize restrictions more than the freedom. We've often in our own households been told that, look, this is not the thing that you say at this point of time. We are as a nation used to the idea that of karmanya vadikaraste, in one sense. That we have a larger social function, and therefore as part of that larger thing, we therefore need to go only on the path of duty without looking at the fruits of that action. I think we would possibly be better served if we were to look at things and say what we see. बोल के लब आज़ाद है तेरे, बोल के ज़ुबान अब तक तेरी है. That is what Faiz Ahmed Faiz from across the border wrote. And it is nothing less that your viewer, your reader expects from you. Speaking truth to power is not just simply a masthead. Justice Patnayak and Paranjay, I think, spoke about Indian Express during the emergency. The Indian Express during the emergency could take that line because Mr. Ramnath Goenka, who incidentally was a businessman with several other business interests, said that I came from Calcutta with a lota, and I am quite content to go back with a lota. It was Catherine Graham of the Washington Post who, with all her wealth, was able to let the story of Watergate play out. It is while a businessman will be very tempted to use a media house to further his business interests, it is also up to the media house concerned to have its own set of critical values which would keep the businessman or keep the business interests under control. Now, in a post-truth world, where there is a price for paying the truth, as also people have said, one of the prices is often the threat that some little thanedar, some big minister, some big industrialist will take a dislike to you to the extent of possibly shutting you up. And we recently have a case which we were discussing with Mr. Ram, where a Hindu correspondent in Ahmedabad has been accused of being part of a GST racket, which his cousin has in a statement said that, look, this man was also helping us, giving us protection, etc. Now, the facts can play out. Investigation can go on. But a taxman, that's all a GST officer is, exercising police powers and keeping the man, a journalist, under detention. Shortly after a journalist writes stories about one important industry in the state of Gujarat, which is the diamond trade. again raises questions. And it is there that collective action of the Editors Guild and others, press clubs like this, have to come into play. And my particular suggestion is that as far as all these legal problems go, and they are going to be continual, it is time that journalists think in terms of litigation protection. Please set aside specific dedicated funds, almost as an insurance policy, knowing that you may or your members may at some point or the other require access to protection. Now, many lawyers can give freely of their time, but as Napoleon famously said, an army marches on its stomach. There will be court fees, there will be typing, there will be cyclostyle, and a whole host of things. You can ask for a lawyer's time, but you may not be able to ask of a junior lawyer's time. This is where I would think that a dedicated fund to which on various occasions people can make contributions is the need of the hour. Justice Patnayak also spoke of how the magistracy has failed from time to time. But I somehow would beg to differ, because the magistracy today consists of many young, bright men and women who have opted, after a 5-year course, a well-researched legal education, to go into the magistracy. It is a magistrate who gave bail to Arvind Kejriwal when she had only a vacation assignment. And this was despite the superior courts having denied bail. I have also, during the CA NRC protests, there were times when we invoked the Chief Justice of India, but no particular effective orders were passed. The only order that was passed, which helped protesters at that point of time, was by a magistrate in Delhi. I have great hopes in the current generation of younger people who have gone into the judicial services, who come from a generation which has decided that we will not get into engineering colleges, but we'll go for law instead. And they have taken seriously their tasks of being custodians of the Constitution. But to reach those custodians when you are in trouble, it still requires more than dedicated lawyers, more than committed magistrates. It also requires a knowledge of the process. And the last thing before I go, especially because there are senior journalists out here, please do not rush to the Supreme Court for everything. When people come to me saying, why don't we go to the Supreme Court? My first reaction often is the first line of the Hippocratic Oath, which applies to doctors. The first thing you do no harm. Because once the Supreme Court says no, there is no other court which can say yes. There was the case of the Kerala journalist Siddiq Kappan, who all that he did was to share a cab to go and examine Hathras. And at that point of time, the administration was very insistent on shutting down any coverage. If he was arrested and had been produced before a magistrate at that point of time, or even any other court, in all probability he would have got bail. But what happened was, immediately there was an approach to the Supreme Court. it became a larger constitutional issue. They had to hear people at great length, and more importantly, the administration of the day then doubled down. Said, no, he is PFI, he is this, he is that, etc., etc., etc. So what would have taken before a magistrate's court, possibly a short hearing, extended to nearly two years or more of detention. So the courts, while they will grant relief, please know which is the appropriate court at which appropriate time. Now, we've gone through all the sections. Justice Patnayak has referred to them. But please be aware that the law is a consistently evolving field. And while there can be no separate protection for journalists, there can be processes put in which make journalism slightly safer. But the correct way to go is to ensure that whatever privileges or whatever safeguards are available to a journalist for free speech are also available to the common citizen. It is when the common citizen speaks up, exercises his right of free speech, that the journalist's power of amplification of free speech, the power of reach, comes into play. It's the freedom of speech as well as the freedom of reach, both of which need protection and will receive a certain measure of defense by the bar and protection by the bench. I thank you for giving me a patient hearing. I am most pleased to take any questions that you may specifically have. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjay. Thank you, Sanjay. And I think one point I just need to reiterate what Sanjay has mentioned, the alliance between journalists and lawyers. I can't reiterate the importance of making friends with lawyers, because they will be your biggest allies. There are enough and more lawyers you will find across the bar, senior, mid-level. And I know Sanjay said that not every lawyer, no matter how well-meaning they are, especially earlier in their career, they might not be able to spare time the way some of the seniors can, because they're, of course, they have the liberty and the luxury to do it. But I would say, in my experience, there are enough and more lawyers, even at the starting stage of their career, where they're very deeply empathetic about the issues that we care about, and they will be the greatest, your partners, because your institution may or may not sometimes support. But individually, if you have lawyers who you can advise, take advice from, fall back upon, your path becomes much easier, and you do find enough and more allies there. All right, thank you everyone. We will bring this session to an end. We will not keep any Q&A because this has been an extended session. There will be enough opportunity to sort of discuss. We will break for lunch. I do request the session, the panelists, the speakers of the next session to please bear with us. And also I would request the audience to bear with us and to join back, because the last session is I think the one that probably is most in sync in terms of the way journalism is moving towards, which is the digital play. All the speakers, they run their own, most of them run their own YouTube channels. They are voices, independent voices, which are speaking in a language and in a format that has become far more pervasive than some of the legacy media. And those challenges are at the cusp of the kind of changing contours of both media regulation and the way networks, because somebody pointed about how networks are being are sort of become a great arbiter in terms of deciding what to be published and what not to be published. So speakers in that session have had experience in all these issues. So thank you everyone. Thank you all the speakers for coming down today. We will continue this dialogue post lunch, and I would request everybody to join back by 2:30. 2:30, yes. Thank you.